Hey, what is up everybody? Taylor with KC here, and today I am super stoked because I'm going to show you all our brand new Flex Era 3 lights. Now I've already done some other videos like an unboxing and a features and spec video, so you can check out the link in the card above and that'll take you to that. But today we're going to do a deep dive into how to install these lights onto a vehicle. And in addition to that, we're going to look at how to wire them as well, simply because this light uses an entirely new wiring harness because it has a built-in amber backlight. Now, because of that amber backlight, it's got that new wiring harness. So we're gonna show you how to install that. And today I'm gonna be installing these onto my 2010 Toyota Tacoma. This is my personal vehicle, and I'm gonna be mounting these onto my A-pillars or my ditch lights. So I used to have a different ditch light in that location, but I ripped those off already today in preparation for the Flex Era 3 lights. Now, as you can see, I'm going to be running the combo beam pattern as opposed to the spot beam or the fog beam, because in that location, I like to aim these lights out a little bit so that way when I go to turn and I look that direction, I want that light to be exactly where it is. So that's why I chose that combo beam pattern. It's going to spread that light out nice and far. So let's take a look at how to mount these suckers up onto my A-pillars, and then we'll dig into the wiring right after that. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm gonna be installing our brand new Flex Era 3 lights onto the A-pillars or the ditch light location on my truck here, but it doesn't really matter where you plan on mounting it. The process is actually gonna be very close to the same. So what you're gonna wanna do to get started is grab your 17 mil, whether it's a socket or an open-ended wrench, exactly like what I've got here, and then you'll take the included nylock nut and the washer completely off of the light. And once you get that done, you'll go ahead and drop the bolt. The bolt stays solid onto the bracket. It's actually welded in at the top. So you'll drop that through your mounting hole like this on my brackets or your lower bumper, whatever it may be. Once that's all the way through, you'll put the washer on and then the nylock nut on after that. And it's as simple as that. It's a very easy process. One thing that's worth mentioning is that when you go to tighten up these lights onto your mounting location, you're not gonna wanna fully crank that down as tight as you can get it if you plan on going out and aiming your light right after you mount it or later on that evening. Simply because if you leave it just snug enough that it holds itself into position but isn't fully cranked down, that's gonna make it a little bit easier to dial that aim in exactly where you want it. So with that said, let's go ahead and install this light here. As you can see, it's a pretty tight gap right there. So I actually have to keep that light lifted up a little bit while I slide that washer in there, hold it with one thumb while I kind of get that nylock nut in, and then you can actually spin the light around a little bit to kind of tighten that nylock nut on just like that, and that's what's gonna start. So as you can see, now everything's started there. So all I gotta do is grab my 17 mil here and just kind of start cranking it away and then get it in the general position where I want it. My ditch lights have some adjustability here. So I'm gonna pull mine all the way out towards the outside of each side of the vehicle. And then I'm gonna keep it aimed roughly where I think is gonna be good until I can go out later this evening and actually dial in that beam. As I mentioned before, the Flex Era 3 wiring harness is different from all of the other wiring harnesses that we've used on our other lights. And that's because both the Flex Era 3 lights and the wiring harness uses a triangular Deutsch connector as opposed to our normal rectangular Deutsch connector. It uses this triangular one because it has two different power leads going into the light itself. One is for that awesome amber backlight, and number two is for the normal full power brightness mode. So with that said, aside from the triangular connector, most of this harness is the same from our other harnesses. So it's going to be a very similar install process. So let's go ahead and dive right into what it looks like to install the Flex Era 3 wiring harness. The first step, all we got to do is pull out, there's two different inline fuses here. One's a 25 amp and one's a 10 amp. So the first step is just to find which one is the 10 amp and then just go ahead and pull that sucker right out of there and then just place it somewhere for safekeeping. This is really just a matter of safety. So we like to do that just to stay safe. Now we've also got the relay for this. It also comes with the relay, the switch, this harness does. We did not install the relay either, just once again for safety. And the first thing that I really like to do is get this whole bundle of wiring harness completely laid out and completely separated into its individual parts, such as the connectors that go to the lights and then the 3 spade ends that go inside of the vehicle for the switches. So that's what I'm going to start with. Now that I got the fuse out, I'm going to start by unraveling this harness and getting it all laid out nicely and neatly. So I've got the 2 Deutsch ends here, so I'm going to lay these maybe across the engine in there. Not too worried about it. Okay, and then now I've got the switch end. So now all 3 of these wires right here, all 3 of these are going to go right to the switches. So I know these are the 3 that I need to feed inside of my cab through the firewall. So I'm going to set this maybe over on this side, kind of maybe over the driver's side mirror, something like that, just so I know exactly what I'm working with here. And then now we're kind of at the bulk of the wiring harness, which is both the relay, the 2 inline fuses, and then the 2 ring terminals. So this wiring harness only has 2 ring terminals. The yellow one is going to go right to your positive side of your battery or your auxiliary switch system or whatever that may be. And then the black is going to go right to your ground. Okay, so here's what I've done already. I just kind of wanted to spare you guys a little bit of the connect the dots while I just connected some of the wiring here. I know how much wiring I need to go inside the cab already, so I've already went ahead and bundled all of the excess wiring up. We do this because this harness is meant to be universal, so it'll fit on a variety of different vehicles, whether it's a long F-250 or a 2-seat Jeep. So that said, I've already gone ahead, I've connected the yellow to the positive side of my battery, and then I've connected the ground right on the inside, right in here. So then next steps for me is going to be to run the wiring all the way to both sides of the A-pillars, and then to run the 3 spades inside of the vehicle for the switch. I've gone ahead and I've already ran all of my wiring for the Deutsch connectors exactly where I want it to go. Now this is one of those big parts that's going to vary depending on where you're mounting these lights and what kind of vehicle you have. So really all you're wanting to do on this step is run these wiring and zip tie them in a location that makes sense for where you're going. You just want everything to be nicely and cleanly organized underneath the vehicle. So now all that's left is to make sure that I can connect these Deutsch connectors here. So it's a super easy little connector. You just kind of plop it in until you hear the click, and that's about it for that. So now that we've got both lights connected to the bulk of the wiring harness, then it is time to run those 3 spade connectors inside of the vehicle into the cab so I can know exactly where I'm going to mount that switch. Now, before you do that though, generally this is a really good time just to go ahead and plug that relay in and plug that fuse back in. Connect the switches, but don't plug those spades all the way into the back of the switch. Just loosely keep them on there and just go ahead and test it out just to make sure everything's working as they should be before you run all the wiring inside of the vehicle and then only to find out something isn't working. So now I've already done that on mine, so I've already tested everything out. Now it's time for me to run those 3 switches in, or those 3 wires for the switch inside of the vehicle. All right, so we're off the tripod now, but I just wanted to take a second to show you guys underneath the hood, this thing, where I ran those 3 wires for the switches. These are the 3 that I'm talking about right here, and I ran these in the factory location through my firewall. It's a little bit hard to see down there just because there's a lot of wires and dirt and grime and stuff in the way through there. So I just ran it through the factory firewall location. Mine's already opened up from some of the other wires that I've already ran. But now that I've got that through, I can just pretty much figure out where underneath the hood that I can hide all the excess wiring so I can still get at my factory fuse panel and then my aftermarket fuse panel, things like that. As you can see, I've already ran the 3 wires for the switch all the way through the firewall. Now on my Toyota Tacoma, this is a 2010, a 2nd gen, the spot for that comes out right behind the factory emergency brake, the foot pedal emergency brake. So that's where that's coming out. Now the next step for this is to run those 3 wires to wherever you're going to be mounting the switch inside of your vehicle. So whether that's right here next to your steering wheel, whether it's closer underneath kind of your radio area, just depends on where you're going to run that. Whatever you do, you just want to make sure that you run these 3 up out of the way of your gas pedal, your brake pedal, your clutch if you have one. Just zip tie it out of the way so you know it's not going to cause any interference with that. That's the absolute last thing that you want to happen. The final step of wiring up your Flex ERA 3 lights is the switch itself. So you need to drill out a 3/4 inch hole in order for this switch to fit nicely, cleanly, and snugly into position. Once you've drilled out that 3/4 inch hole in a location that you know there's nothing really behind it, you need about maybe 2 inches, maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches of mounting depth. Once you've got that hole drilled out, then you can pull those 3 wires up and through that hole, so that way you can connect them to the switch outside of the hole, and then you'll go ahead and push everything into position once you've got it all wired up. So for the wiring, what you're gonna do is you're gonna connect the yellow wire right to the center spade on the switch itself. Then as you look at the switch, there's a side with 1 line and then there's a side with 2 lines. The side with 1 line is gonna get the green wire, and then the side with 2 lines is gonna get the white wire. Then you can go ahead and verify that everything works. And once it does, then you can go ahead and push your wires back through and then plop your button right into position and make sure that friction fit is really nicely and securely done. And with that, that's everything that you need to know to install the brand new KC Flex ERA 3 lights onto your vehicle and how to wire them up at the same time. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we also have some really cool videos, such as how to swap out your beam pattern and how to change out the colored bezels on the Flex ERA 3 lights. So feel free to check those out by using the link down in the description below or by clicking the card up in the top corner right there. Now, we hope you all enjoyed this video and we hope you all found it very useful. And we know that you're gonna be so stoked to receive your pair of Flex ERA 3 lights. So we'd love to hear your feedback and your thoughts on those. So feel free to drop that right in the comment section below as well. Thank you all once again for tuning in, and remember to adventure further.